Good day, I'm Angela Tabu and I'm here to discuss about Lesson 13, Managing Human Resources Globally. The environment in which the business competes is rapidly becoming globalized. More and more companies are entering international markets by exporting their products overseas, building plants in other countries, and entering into alliances with foreign companies. Now you may ask, what is behind the trend toward expansion into global markets? Companies are attempting to gain a competitive advantage, which can be provided by international expansion in a number of ways. First, these countries are new markets with large number of potential customers. For companies that are producing below their capacity, they provide a means of increasing sales and profits. Second, many companies are building production facilities in other countries as a means of capitalizing on those countries' lower labor costs for relatively unskilled jobs. So let's proceed to the first topic, factors affecting HRM in global markets. These are culture, education, human capital, economic system, and political legal system. Let's first talk about culture. By far the most important factor influencing international HRM is the culture of the country in which the facility is located. Culture is defined as the set of important assumptions that the members of a community share. These assumptions consist of beliefs about the world and how it works and the ideals that are worth striving for. Culture is important to HRM for several reasons. First, it often determines the other three factors affecting HRM in global markets. Culture can greatly affect a country's laws. In that laws are often the codification of right and wrong as defined by the culture. Culture also affects human capital, because if education is greatly valued by the culture, then members of the community will try to increase their human capital. However, the most important reason that culture is important to HRM is that it often determines the effectiveness of various HRM practices. Practices found to be effective in the United States may not be effective in the culture that has different beliefs and values. Now let's discuss Hofstede's cultural dimension. One of Hofstede's cultural dimensions is individualism collectivism. It describes the strength of the relation between an individual and other individual in a society. That is the degree to which people act as individuals rather than as members of a group. In individualist cultures, such as United States, Great Britain, and Netherlands, people are expected to look after their own interests and other interests of their immediate families. Next is power distance. Power distance describes how a culture deals with hierarchical power relationships, particularly the unequal distribution of power. It describes the degree of inequality among people that is considered to be normal. Cultures with small power distance, such as those of Denmark and Israel, seek to eliminate inequalities in power and wealth as much as possible, whereas countries with large power distance, such as India and Philippines, seek to maintain those differences. The third dimension is uncertainty avoidance. It describes how cultures seek to deal with the fact that the future is not perfectly predictable. It is defined as the degree to which people in the culture prefer structured over unstructured situations. Some cultures, such as those of Singapore and Jamaica, have weak uncertainty avoidance. They socialize individuals to accept this uncertainty and take each day as it comes. People from these cultures tend to be rather easygoing and flexible regarding different views. The fourth dimension is masculinity and femininity dimension. It describes the division of roles between the sexes within a society. In masculine cultures such as those of Germany and Japan, what are considered traditionally masculine values such as showing off, achieving something visible, and making money permeate the society. These societies stress assertiveness, performance, success, and competition. Feminine cultures such as those in Sweden and Norway promote values that have been traditionally regarded as feminine, such as putting relationships before money, helping others, and preserving the environment. These cultures stress service, care for the weak, and solidarity. Finally, the fifth dimension comes from the philosophy of the Far East and is referred to as the long-term, short-term orientation. Cultures high on long-term orientation focus on the future and hold values in the present that will not necessarily provide an immediate benefit such as thrift and persistence. Hofstede found that many Far Eastern countries such as Japan and China have a long-term orientation. Short-term orientations, on the other hand, are found in the United States, Russia, and West Africa. These cultures are oriented toward the past and present and promote respect for tradition and fulfilling social obligations. Implications of culture for HRM. Cultural characteristics influence the ways managers behave in relation to subordinates, as well as the perceptions of the appropriateness of various HRM practices. First implication is cultures differ strongly on such things as how subordinates expect leaders to lead, how decisions are handled within the hierarchy, and the most important is what motivates individuals. Second implication, cultures may influence the appropriateness of HRM practices. For example, as previously discussed, the extent to which a culture promotes an individualistic versus a collectivist orientation will impact the effectiveness of individually oriented human resource management systems. The second factor affecting HRM in global markets is education human capital. A company's potential to find and maintain a qualified workforce is an important consideration in any decision to expand into a foreign market. Thus, a country's human capital resources can be an important HRM issue. Human capital refers to the productive capabilities of an individual, that is, the knowledge, skills, and experiences that have economic value. A country's human capital is determined by a number of variables. A major variable is the educational opportunities available to the labor force. In Netherlands, for instance, government funding of schools systems allow students to go all the way through graduate schools without paying. The other factor is the political legal system. The regulations imposed by a country's legal system can strongly affect HRM. The political legal system often dictates the requirements for a certain HRM practices, such as training, compensation, hiring, firing, and layoffs. In large part, the legal system is an outgrowth of the culture in which it exists. Thus, the laws of a particular country often reflect societal norms about what constitutes legitimate behavior. The last factor affecting HRM in global markets is economic system. A country's economic system influences HRM in a number of ways. As previously discussed, a country's culture is integrally tied to its economic system, and these systems provide many of the incentives for developing human capital. In socialist economic systems, there are ample opportunities for developing human capital because the education system is free. However, under these systems, there is little economic incentive to develop human capital because there are no monetary rewards for increasing human capital. In addition, in former Soviet bloc countries, an individual's investment in human capital did not always result in promotion. Rather, it was an investment in the Communist Party that led to career advancements. Now let's proceed to the topic, managing employees in global context, types of international employees. The first type is the parent country, the country in which the company's corporate headquarters is located. Second is host country, the country in which the parent country organization seeks to locate or has already located a facility. Next is third country, a country other than the host or a parent country. The fourth is expatriate, an employee sent by his or her company in one country to manage operations in a different country. Another type is the parent country nationals or the PCNs. These are employees who were born and live in the parent country. Another is the host country nationals or the HCNs. These are employees who were born and raised in the host, not the parent country. And the last one is the third country nationals or the TCNs, and these are employees born in the country other than the parent or host country. We often hear companies referred to as multinational or international. However, it is important to understand the different levels of participation in international markets. This is especially important because as company becomes more involved in international trade, different types of HRM problems arise. In this section, we examine Nancy Adler's categorization of various levels of international participation from which a company may choose, and this figure depicts these levels of involvement. Most companies begin by operating within a domestic marketplace. As more competitors enter the domestic marketplace, companies face the possibility of losing market share, thus they often seek other markets for their products. This usually requires entering international markets, initially by exporting products but ultimately by building production facilities in other countries. Whereas international companies build one or a few facilities in another country, they became multinational when they build facilities in a number of different countries, attempting to capitalize on lower production and distribution costs in different locations. Many researchers now propose a fourth level of integration: global organizations. Global organizations compete on a state-of-the-art, top-quality products and services and do so with the lowest costs possible. Whereas multinational companies attempt to develop identical products distributed worldwide, global companies increasingly emphasize flexibility and mass customization of products to meet the needs of particular clients. A transnational HRM system is characterized by three attributes. First is transnational scope. This is a company's ability to make HRM decisions from an international perspective. Second, transnational representation. This reflects the multinational composition of a company's managers. And third, transnational process. The extent to which a company's planning and decision-making processes include representatives and ideas from a variety of cultures. A successful expatriate manager must be sensitive to the country's cultural norms, flexible enough to adapt to those norms, and strong enough to make it through the inevitable cultural shock. In addition, the manager's family must be similarly capable of adapting to the new culture. These adaptive skills have been categorized into three dimensions. First, the self dimension. These are the skills that enable a manager to maintain a positive self image and psychological well being. Second is the relationship dimension. These are the skills required to foster relationship with the host country nationals. And third, the perception dimension. These are the skills that enable a manager to accurately perceive and evaluate the host environment. Select topics for assessing candidates for overseas assignments. One study of international assignees found that they considered the following 5 factors to be important in descending order of importance: family situation, flexibility and adaptability, job knowledge and motivation, relational skills, and extracultural openness. The following slides presents a few examples of considerations and questions to ask potential expatriate managers to assess their ability to adapt to a new cultural environment. So for the motivation factor, example questions are: what are the candidate's reason and degree of interest in warning an overseas assignment? Or does the candidate have a realistic understanding of what is required in working and living overseas? For health, are there any health issues with the candidate or family members that might impact the success of the overseas assignment? For language ability, does the candidate have the potential to learn a new language? Or does the candidate's spouse have the ability to learn a new language? And for family considerations, how many moves has the family made among different cities or part of the United States? What problems were encountered? And what is the spouse's goal in this move overseas? For resourcefulness and initiative factor, is the candidate independent and capable of standing by his or her own decisions? Is the candidate able to meet objectives and produce positive results with whatever human resources and facilities are available regardless of challenges that might arise in foreign business environment? And for the adaptability factor, is the candidate cooperative, open to the opinions of others, and able to compromise? Or how does the candidate react to new situations and efforts to understand and appreciate cultural differences? For the career planning, does the candidate consider the assignment more than a temporary overseas trip? Or is the overseas assignment consistent with the candidate's career development and one that was planned by the company? And for the last factor, financial, Are there any current financial and/or legal considerations that might affect the assignment, such as house or car purchases or college expenses? Or will undue financial pressures be put upon the candidate or and his or her family as a result of an overseas assignment? So now let's proceed to the training and development of expatriates. A review of the cross-cultural training literature found support for the belief that cross-cultural training has an impact on effectiveness. This entails emphasizing a few aspects of cultural sensitivity. First, expatriates must be clear about their own cultural background, particularly as it is perceived by the host nationals. Second, expatriates must understand the particular aspects of culture in the new work environment. And finally, expatriates must learn to communicate accurately in the new culture. Compensation of expatriates. One of the more troublesome aspects of managing expatriates is determining the compensation package. Most use a balance sheet approach to determine the total package level. This approach entails developing a total compensation package that equalizes the purchasing power of the expatriate manager with that of the employees in similar positions in the home country and provides incentives to offset the inconveniences incurred in the location. Purchasing power includes all of the expenses associated with the expatriate assignment. Expenses include goods and services such as food, personal care, clothing, recreation, and transportation. Housing, such as for a principal residence, income taxes paid to federal and local government, and reserve for savings, payments for benefits, and pension contributions, and also shipments and storage for costs associated with moving and/or storing personal belongings. Here is an example of a typical balance sheet. And for the last topic, reacculturation of expatriates. A final issue of importance to managing expatriates is dealing with the reacculturation process when the managers re-enter their home country. Companies are increasingly making efforts to help expatriates through reacculturation. Two characteristics help in this transition process: communication and validation. Communication refers to the extent to which the expatriate receives information and recognizes changes while abroad. The closer the contact with the home organization while abroad, the more proactive, effective, and satisfied the expatriate will be upon the re-entry. While validation refers to the amount of recognition received by the expatriate upon return home. So that is all for Lesson 13. Thank you for listening.